Hello, this is Ben Television News Roundup, a compilation of major stories in the weekend. I'm Tunde Alabi. Thank you for being part of the program today. UK Chancellor Philip Hammond has announced a series of investment into infrastructural development in order to drive growth. Delivering his first autumn statement, the Chancellor announced £23 billion for innovation and infrastructure as a new national development fund.
So we choose in this autumn statement to prioritise additional high-value investment, specifically in infrastructure and innovation, that will directly contribute to raising Britain's productivity. And the key judgment we make today, Mr. Speaker, is that our hard-won credibility on public spending means that we can fund this commitment in the short term from additional borrowing, while funding all other new policies announced in this autumn statement through additional tax and spending measures. That is the responsible way to secure our economy for the long term. Mr. Speaker, the productivity gap is well known to honourable and right honourable members, but shocking nonetheless. It bears repeating. We lag the US and Germany by some 30 percentage points in productivity, but we also lag France by over 20 points and Italy by 8 points, which means in the real world it takes a German worker 4 days to produce what we make in 5. And that means in turn that too many British workers work longer hours for lower pay than their counterparts, and that has to change if we are to build an economy that works for everyone. So raising productivity, Mr. Speaker, is essential for the high-wage, high-skill economy that will deliver higher living standards for working people across this country. As a result of decisions taken by my predecessor, public investment is higher over this decade than it was over the whole of the period of the last Labour government. But today, I can go further. I can announce that we are forming a new National Productivity Investment Fund of £23 billion to be spent on innovation and infrastructure over the next 5 years, investing today for the economy of the future. Let me set out, Mr. Speaker, for the House how this money will be used. Mr. Speaker, we do not invest enough in research, development and innovation. As the pace of technology advances and competition from the rest of the world increases, we must build on our strengths in science and tech innovation to ensure that the next generation of discoveries is not only made here, but is also developed and produced in Britain. So today I can confirm the additional investment in R&D rising to an extra £2 billion per year by 2021, announced by my right honourable friend the Prime Minister on Monday. Mr. Speaker, economically productive infrastructure directly benefits businesses, but families too rely on roads, rail, telecoms and especially housing. We've made good progress with the number of new homes being built last year hitting an 8-year high, but for too many the goal of home ownership remains out of reach. In October, my right honourable friend the Communities Secretary launched the £3 billion Home Builders Fund to unlock over 200,000 homes and up to £2 billion to accelerate construction on public sector land. But we must go further still. The challenge of delivering the housing we so desperately need in the places where it is currently least affordable is not, of course, a new one, but the effect of unaffordable housing on our nation's productivity makes it an urgent one. My right honourable friend the Communities Secretary will bring forward a housing white paper in due course addressing these long-term challenges. But in the meantime, we can take further steps. One of the biggest objections to housing development, as honourable and right honourable members will know from their own constituencies, is often the impact on local infrastructure. So we will focus government infrastructure investment to unlock land for housing, with a new £2.3 billion housing infrastructure fund to deliver infrastructure for up to 100,000 new homes in areas of high demand, and to provide affordable housing that supports a wide range of need we will invest a further £1.4 billion to deliver 40,000 additional affordable homes. And I will also relax restrictions on government grant to allow providers to deliver a wider range of housing types. I can also announce a large-scale regional pilot of Right to Buy for housing association tenants and continued support for home ownership through the Help to Buy equity loan scheme and the Help to Buy ISA. Mr. Speaker, this package means that over the course of this Parliament, the Government expects to more than double, in real terms, annual capital spending on housing. Coupled with our resolve to tackle the long-term challenges of land supply, this commitment to housing delivery represents a step change in our ambition to increase the supply of homes for sale and for rent, to deliver a housing market that works for everyone.
The Chancellor in the autumn statement said that the target of the government is to ensure that Britain remains the #1 destination for business as the country leaves Europe. He said more money is being spent on infrastructure to open up Britain for global business and mitigate any negative effect of Brexit when Article 50 is eventually triggered.
Public investment is only part of the picture. About half of our economic infrastructure is financed by the private sector, and we will continue to support that investment through the UK Guarantee Scheme, which I am today extending until at least 2026. The new capital investment I've announced will provide the financial backbone for the government's industrial strategy, which the Prime Minister spoke about on Monday, a firm foundation upon which my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, will work with industry to build our ambition of an economy that works for all. And I can announce 4 further measures to back business. I'm doubling UK export finance capacity to make it easier for British businesses to export. I'm funding Charlie Mayfield's business-led initiative to boost management skills across British businesses. And I'm taking a first step to tackle the long-standing problem of our fastest-growing start-up tech firms being snapped up by bigger companies rather than growing to scale by injecting an initial £400 million into venture capital funds through the British Business Bank, unlocking £1 billion of new finance for growing firms. And I'm also launching today a Treasury-led review of the barriers to accessing patient capital in the UK so that we can take further action to address them. Mr. Speaker, this government recognises that for too long, economic growth in our country has been too concentrated in London and the South East. That is not just a social problem, it's an economic problem. London is one of the highest productivity cities in the world, and we should celebrate that fact. But no other major developed economy has such a gap between the productivity of its capital city and its second and third cities. So we must drive up the performance of our regional cities. Today, we publish our strategy for addressing productivity barriers in the Northern Powerhouse and give the go-ahead to a programme of major road schemes in the north. Our Midlands Engine strategy will follow shortly, but I am today providing funding so that the evaluation study for the Midlands Rail Hub can go ahead. In addition, we are investing in local infrastructure in every region of England. I can announce the allocation of £1.8 billion from the Local Growth Fund to the English regions, £556 million to local enterprise partnerships in the north of England, £542 million to the Midlands and east of England, and £683 million to LEPs in the southwest, southeast and London. We will announce the detailed breakdown of allocations to individual LEPs shortly. Devolution, Mr. Speaker, remains at the heart of this government's approach to supporting local growth, and we recommit today to our city deals with Swansea, Edinburgh, North Wales and Tay cities. And I can announce today that we are beginning negotiations on a city deal for Stirling so that every single city in Scotland will be on course to have a city deal. To support new mayoral combined authorities in England, I can announce that we will grant them new borrowing powers to reflect their new responsibilities. And while we continue discussions with London and the West Midlands on possible devolution of further powers, I can announce today that London will receive £3.15 billion as its share of national affordable housing funding to deliver a commitment of over 90,000 affordable homes, and also that we are devolving to London the adult education budget and giving London greater control over the delivery of employment support services for the hardest to help.
Meanwhile, the Chancellor John McDonnell has said the autumn statement revealed the failure of the government to get a grip of the economy.
The verdict could not be clearer. The so-called long-term economic plan has failed. And as the Treasury's own leaked paper revealed, the government knew it had failed before the referendum result was announced. And we now face Brexit, the greatest economic challenge of a generation, and we face it unprepared and ill-equipped. The new Chancellor acknowledged the failure himself in October of the economic strategy when he promised a reset of economic policy. So today we expected a change of direction after those 6 wasted years. Instead, we've seen further cuts to earnings for those in work through cuts to universal credit and a living wage increase that is lower than expected under the previous Chancellor. This is a new Conservative leadership with no answers to the challenges facing our country following Brexit and no vision to secure our future prosperity. Just turning to Brexit, Labour respects the decision of the British people to leave the European Union, but the chaotic Tory handling of Brexit threatens the future prosperity of this country. The Chancellor must now do the right thing for British workers and businesses. He must insist on full tariff-free access to the single market. He and the Treasury know that's what will give the best deal for jobs and prosperity here. I just say it may not be in the Chancellor's nature, but in the national interest, I urge him to stand up to the Prime Minister and the extreme Brexit fanatics in her cabinet. If he stands up for British businesses and jobs in fighting for single market access, he will have our full support. But after 6 wasted years, wages are still lower than 2008. Self-employed people are on average paid less than a generation ago. 6 million people are earning less than the living wage. Too many people are having to worry about buying school uniforms, affording a family holiday, or even just paying the rent or mortgage. We've had a month of briefing from the party opposite on those people who are called just about managing, the jams. To the party opposite, these people are just an electoral demographic. To us, they're our friends, our neighbours, and the people we represent. Let me tell you what they are, why they are just managing. Why are they just managing? It's the results of Tories imposing austerity on an economy that couldn't bear the strain. We've seen productivity stagnate, but there's nothing in this autumn statement on the scale needed to overturn those 6 wasted years. If the Chancellor really wants to make a fair tax system as well, he can start by bringing back the 50p rate for the very richest in our country. And it is familiar, hollow rhetoric from the Tories on tax avoidance when they've cut the resources at HMRC, the very people there staffed to collect the taxes themselves. Resources available to HMRC today are 40% less than they were in 2000. The Chancellor has frozen in-work benefits at a time when food prices are rising and we don't expect wages to keep up. We need an economy that is fundamentally more prosperous and where that prosperity is, yes, shared by all. The increase in the national living wage announced today are actually lower than expected and leave the poorest paid workers still earning less than they need to live on. So I ask the Chancellor to adopt a real living wage level, as Labour has pledged to do, and abandon his predecessor's empty rhetoric. Regrettably, the Chancellor is still going ahead with some of the cuts to universal credit. Thanks to the pressure, and I pay tribute to those MPs on all sides of the House, who've campaigned on this issue. Thanks to that pressure, he's offering to soften the blow. We do not want the blow softened, we want it lifted altogether. Today's changes will leave a single parent on average at least £2,300 worse off. These are the very people who are working hard to deliver for their families, and the government is betraying them. As for the people with disabilities put through the ordeal of the discredited work capability assessment, who are trying to get themselves ready to return to work, just about managing, they still remain in the Chancellor's firing line, cutting £30 a week from the support that these disabled people receive. It is scandalous in our society. Those who are just about managing also rely upon our public services. They send their children to local schools. They depend on their local hospital. They rely on their council services like cleaning the streets, tending to their parks and playgrounds, and opening their libraries. But the reality is, after 6 wasted years, our public services are just not managing. Today, the childcare that parents rely upon remains underfunded, as the Public Accounts Committee has reported, and it will remain underfunded even after the announcements today.
Now to Africa, a new rapid testing kit that will detect Ebola virus early in patients have arrived. Africa, the new testing kits will make Ebola virus detection faster than it was in 2014 when it broke out in some African countries and killed more than 10,000 people in both Sierra Leone, Guinea and Liberia.
The 2014 Ebola outbreak in West Africa was the largest and most complex since the virus was discovered in 1976. The hardest hit countries, Sierra Leone, Liberia and Guinea, faced crippling hurdles in fighting its spread, including no quick way to diagnose patients.
It would take 2 or 3, sometimes 4 days to get results back. In the meantime, you had malaria patients in with Ebola patients, and if you didn't have Ebola before, you're likely to have Ebola after.
Images of deserted villages. This little girl found alone in a house with her sister dying of Ebola and a husband watching his dead wife being carried away by undertakers are stark reminders of what the region went through. As the number of Ebola cases was multiplying in some parts of West Africa, thousands of miles away, right here in Utah, a rapid testing kit, which has been in the works for years, was ready to go. Cynthia Phillips helped develop the Ebola testing kit for BioFire Defense.
The FilmArray kit is both an instrument that is a diagnostic and a little pouch that's disposable and room temperature stable that you put a human sample in and some water, and then you put it into the instrument and it gives you back results on a whole series of tests or pathogens that you might have in that sample.
It gave us the ability to test patients in 1 hour.
Americans anxiously watched the first Ebola patient arrive on U.S. soil. Dr. Kent Brantley, who had been working in Liberia, was brought to Emory University Hospital in Atlanta. Eileen Bird is Emory's clinical microbiology director and recalls those first days.
I will have to admit, the first time I opened that first tube of blood, knowing what was in there and what it was doing to the patient down the hall was a little daunting. And so it caused me pause, and then you take a deep breath and you do the work you need to do.
Emory Hospital treated 4 Ebola patients, and Dr. Bird says she's reassured FilmArray was among the tools on hand during the crisis. The instrument is one of 7 diagnostic tools the World Health Organization has approved for emergency use. Guinea's Health Ministry Inspector General also is grateful.
Before, we had to transport samples to Dakar, Senegal, or Lyon in France, but today, thanks to our partners in France, the CDC in the US, and many others, we are able to make rapid diagnosis for Ebola.
More than 11,000 people died before the West Africa Ebola epidemic was contained. Health experts hope these new rapid testing tools can drastically lower deaths in future outbreaks.
While US President Barack Obama has urged the president-elect Donald Trump to respect America's pact with the rest of the world on major international treaties. Mr. Obama was speaking in Peru, where he tried to reassure the world leaders who are anxious about a possible sharp shift in U.S. foreign policy under Trump presidency.
President Barack Obama met with the leaders of the 21 Asia-Pacific Economic Conference, still expressing his support for international trade and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, while conceding it is not up to him anymore. At the end of the final news conference of the trip, Obama had some sobering words of advice for the incoming president, saying America is indispensable in protecting world order and ensuring peace and stability.
If we're not on the side of what's right, if we're not making the argument and fighting for it, even if sometimes we're not able to deliver it 100% everywhere, then it collapses. And there's nobody to fill the void.
Asked if he would refrain from criticizing Trump when he takes office, Obama said he planned to take his wife Michelle on vacation and that he would be respectful and give the new president space. But he said he might speak out if he believed core values were threatened. On Saturday, Obama got a rock star's welcome from 1,000 young leaders from all over Latin America and the Caribbean at a university in Lima. He sought to reassure everyone in his young audience and asked them not to assume the worst of Trump.
Democracy means that sometimes you have to compromise. And it means that, the outcomes of elections don't always turn out the way you would hope.
During his farewell overseas trip, Obama told travel guidebook publisher Lonely Planet that the millions of miles he traveled during his 8 years in office and the young people he met all over the world give him hope for the future.
Also, President Obama said that although he could not guarantee that Mr. Trump will not pursue some of the things he said during the campaigns, he said the reality of the office of the president will force him to adjust his opinions.
The president-elect now has to put together a team and put forward specifics about how he intends to govern. And he hasn't had a full opportunity to do that yet. And so people should take a wait-and-see approach in how much his policy proposals once in the White House, once he is sworn in, matches up with some of the rhetoric of his campaign. My simple point is that you can't assume that the language of campaigning matches up with the specifics of governing legislation, regulations, and foreign policy. I can't be sure of anything. I think, like everyone else, we'll have to wait and see. But as I've said before, once you're in the Oval Office, once you begin interacting with world leaders, once you see the complexities of the issues, that has a way of shaping your thinking and in some cases modifying your thinking because you recognize this solemn responsibility not only to the American people but the solemn responsibility that America has as the largest, most powerful country in the world. And I can't guarantee that the president-elect won't pursue some of the positions that he's taken. But what I can guarantee is that reality will force him to adjust how he approaches many of these issues.
And with that, we'll conclude the news channel for this week. Thank you for being part of the program. I'm Tunde Alabi. Enjoy the rest of your week. Bye. Part of our continued efforts to reach the African and other ethnic communities in the United Kingdom with greater impacts and create the platform to hear your silent and unheard views in this hugely growing community in the United Kingdom, our channel, Ben TV, presents to you another live current affairs television program. Our focus on the program is to review and discuss issues around the diaspora community in the UK. The program offers you that unrestricted voice on issues affecting you in the UK. Join us live every Monday at 10 a.m. to 12 noon. Another business segment of Dialogue in Diaspora, 2 to 3 p.m. every Monday. But guess what? You know you can be part of the program. Just send us an email at bentelevisionuk@gmail.com. Dialogue in Diaspora, your voice, your opinion on our TV.